This is kind of a difficult video to make because anytime you talk about a possible price increase, it automatically feels doomy. It feels negative. It really feels like bad news. And I really don't think this is something to panic over, but I do think it's something that needs to be taken seriously. Because when you look at the broader tech landscape right now, a price increase could very well be on the horizon. And if that's the case, I want you to feel prepared, not surprised, by something that could be inevitable. That doesn't mean it's confirmed, and it doesn't mean it's happening tomorrow. But it does mean the conditions exist for a price increase to happen. And that's what we're going to talk through. If you're new here, welcome. This is the Input Lag. We evaluate Nintendo news thoughtfully. If that's your vibe, subscribe. The root of this controversy is memory, specifically DRAM. Dynamic Random Access Memory. There have been serious spikes in DRAM pricing. At one point, one category surged roughly 75% in a short period. That kind of volatility doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's being driven heavily by AI infrastructure. Companies like Meta, Microsoft, and Alphabet are building massive data centers. Those data centers require enormous volumes of high-performance memory. When demand surges at that scale, supply tightens. When supply tightens, prices increase. Nintendo uses memory sourced from that same global supply ecosystem. If memory becomes more expensive at scale, production costs rise. And when production costs rise, companies eventually have to make some difficult decisions. This isn't happening in isolation. It's certainly not unique to Nintendo. Sony, for example, has already navigated cost pressures during this generation. The PlayStation 5 saw price increases in several regions, something that would have felt unthinkable a decade ago. Microsoft adjusted pricing for both the Xbox Series X and the Xbox Series S in various markets as well. And beyond gaming, hardware costs across consumer electronics, GPUs, laptops, smartphones, have all responded to similar supply pressures. Like I said, this isn't just a Nintendo story. It's a generation operating under tighter global supply conditions than we're used to, and that context matters. I want to know where you land on this. When you hear possible price increase, what's your instinct? Comment below, I read every one. Let's talk about the actual impact. The Nintendo Switch 2 currently sits at $449.99. If that price moves to $499.99, that's not just a number on paper. That makes it way more difficult for families to bring a Nintendo Switch 2 home. For households already balancing rising costs with groceries, rent, utilities, another $50 can be the difference between buying one now and waiting indefinitely. For families buying multiple consoles, that compounds quickly. And that's the thing, this ultimately becomes about accessibility. Nintendo has traditionally occupied a more affordable position in the console market. If that shifts upward, even modestly, it changes who can comfortably participate. And that deserves to be acknowledged plainly. The weight of this conversation isn't just about the money. It's about the direction. Upward movement in hardware pricing signals tightening conditions. It really suggests that pressure isn't easing. Even if the increase itself is moderate, upward adjustments communicate instability in the broader system, and that makes people uneasy. The deeper issue here is AI's appetite for memory. AI systems are absorbing enormous quantities of DRAM, and that demand creates scarcity, which then in turn drives prices upward. This isn't necessarily new, and with AI investment accelerating so rapidly, it's creating some pretty inflated pricing bubbles. If that bubble expands, pricing pressure spreads across the tech economy. And if that bubble ever pops, it could trigger further instability. Gaming hardware exists downstream of that. That doesn't guarantee a price hike, but it absolutely increases the probability. Should you be worried? No. But you should be informed. Nothing has been announced. Nothing has been confirmed. But the pressure points are visible. If memory remains scarce, if AI demand continues scaling, then upward pricing movement becomes logical. Being informed means understanding the forces that shape decisions, not panicking about them. This isn't doom, it's pressure. A potential price increase wouldn't be random. It would be a response to rising input costs, scarcity, and a tech economy currently inflating around AI infrastructure. That may make the Switch 2 more difficult for some families to access. But the price increase wouldn't be dramatic. It wouldn't even be Nintendo being greedy. So here's where I land on this. You don't need to panic, you don't need to rush out tomorrow and buy a Nintendo Switch 2, but you should understand the environment Nintendo is operating in. Hardware pricing doesn't exist in isolation anymore. It exists inside a broader tech economy, being reshaped by AI demands, supply pressure, and shifting global priorities. And while that can feel heavy, it doesn't change why we're here in the first place. We're here because of the games. And if you want something a little bit lighter after all this macro talk, I just put out my review for Mario Tennis Fever. What works, what doesn't, and whether it's actually worth your time. So if you want to pivot from economics to actual gameplay, this video is right here. I'll see you over there.